Heavy is the head that wears 15 crowns, the age-old saying goes. Never has it felt more accurate than in the case of King Charles III, the monarch who, upon ascending to the throne, found himself burdened not only by the weight of centuries of royal legacy, but also by a political storm of extraordinary magnitude. At the heart of this turmoil lies a seemingly innocuous decision, a diplomatic invitation to Donald Trump for a second state visit to the UK. However, as we know all too well, in the world of royal diplomacy, even the smallest gesture can send ripples across the globe. The invitation to the former US president, despite being an entirely formal and traditional request, has caused an explosive political and diplomatic crisis that could alter the course of King Charles's reign, and more dangerously, the fate of the British monarchy itself. Once considered a neutral figurehead, King Charles is now being thrust into the heart of a global political storm, one that could endanger his reputation, jeopardize the monarchy's standing with the people, and redefine his legacy as a ruler. The trouble began earlier this month, when UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, who was already embroiled in his own series of political challenges, made the fateful decision to extend a second state visit invitation to Donald Trump. The invite, delivered by the Prime Minister himself to Trump during a recent diplomatic visit to Washington, was framed as a symbol of the enduring alliance between the US and the UK, two nations traditionally bound by a deep historical and cultural connection. In theory, this was meant to be a standard diplomatic gesture, an event meant to strengthen the relationship between the two countries, one that has lasted centuries. But in this new age of political polarization and global unrest, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. What seemed like an ordinary diplomatic event quickly spiraled into a full-blown international crisis, with the potential to engulf the monarchy itself. Upon hearing of the invitation, the reaction in the UK was swift, furious, and unrelenting. Citizens, politicians, and public figures alike expressed their outrage with overwhelming intensity, condemning the decision to invite a leader as divisive and controversial as Donald Trump back into their country. Within hours of the news breaking, protests began to spread across the nation. From London to Edinburgh, people took to the streets, waving placards and chanting slogans calling for Trump's visit to be cancelled before it could even take place. The backlash was deafening. Polling data indicated that a majority of the British population, approximately 51%, believed that Trump should never have been invited in the first place. Even more startling, a petition calling for the cancellation of the visit garnered over 300,000 signatures in mere days, with that number continuing to climb as the days wore on. It was a stark reminder that despite the royal family's historically apolitical nature, the modern monarchy has never been fully detached from the political pulse of the nation. King Charles, who had always hoped to embody a more modern, neutral monarchy, now found himself caught in a political firestorm that could define his reign. The decision, it seemed, was no longer about maintaining protocol or the preservation of diplomatic tradition. It was about whether the monarchy, and by extension the king himself, could survive the storm of public opinion that was now gathering strength. As the backlash grew, the mounting pressure on King Charles became almost unbearable. The monarch, who had spent his life preparing for a reign built on stability and diplomatic relations, now faced a series of incredibly difficult decisions that could ultimately determine whether his legacy would be remembered as one of strength or failure. At the heart of the crisis was a fundamental question: should King Charles uphold the centuries-old tradition of royal diplomacy, which requires the monarch to host foreign leaders at the request of the government, even those as polarizing as Donald Trump? Or should he bow to the overwhelming public sentiment, refusing to host Trump and risk alienating the UK government and his allies? While the official line has always been that the monarchy remains apolitical, a position that allows the Queen, and now Charles, to navigate even the most contentious political waters, this crisis has called that neutrality into question in ways that were unimaginable just a few short months ago. The decision to extend the invitation to Trump, it turns out, was not merely about the niceties of state visits. It was about public perception and the future of the monarchy itself. The king, a man who once spoke about his desire to be a peacemaker, in a world increasingly divided, now finds himself trapped in a high-stakes political game where every move is scrutinized, and every decision could come with dire consequences. It is a diplomatic tightrope walk, where each step could either lead to political chaos, or to a seemingly necessary political compromise. As if the situation were not complicated enough, there is another layer to this crisis. Canada, one of the Commonwealth realms over which King Charles serves as head of state, finds itself at the mercy of increasingly aggressive U.S. trade policies. Trump's ongoing threats of tariffs and economic warfare against Canada have stirred fears of escalating tensions between the two North American neighbors, particularly over trade and border security. King Charles, a monarch who has long expressed his affection for Canada and its people, is now in an impossible position. As Canada's symbolic head of state, he must balance his role as a figurehead with the very real political realities that are shaping the relationship between Canada and the U.S. Should Trump's policies further harm Canadian interests, the monarch might find himself facing calls to take a stand in support of Canada, potentially alienating the U.S. and deepening the rift between two key allies. If the king were to show public support for Canada, it would mark a dramatic shift in the royal family's traditional diplomatic stance. Historically, the monarchy has refrained from taking sides in international disputes, preferring to leave such matters to the elected government. But this situation is unprecedented, and King Charles may find that his role as monarch requires him to step into a leadership role on the international stage, something that could have profound implications for the future of the monarchy. As the months pass and the Trump invitation crisis continues to escalate, the stakes for King Charles become clearer. Should he choose to host Trump, the king risks further alienating an already divided British public, not to mention the growing skepticism surrounding the monarchy in Canada and other Commonwealth realms. Public opinion, always a delicate balance for any monarch, could quickly shift against him, with many asking whether the royal family's role in modern politics needs to be re-examined. But rejecting the invitation could have even greater ramifications. By publicly defying the government's wishes, King Charles could find himself at the center of a constitutional crisis, with his decision potentially triggering a resignation from Prime Minister Starmer and forcing the UK into a general election. In the worst-case scenario, a refusal to host Trump could even lead to calls for the abdication of the throne, a fate that would be both humiliating and unprecedented in the modern era. As the weeks unfold, the world watches as King Charles confronts the most difficult challenge of his reign. He is not just a monarch. He is a man caught in a high-stakes political web, trying to maintain the fragile unity of his kingdom while balancing the complex demands of the world stage. The decision he makes in the coming months could shape the future of the British monarchy for generations to come. It is a moment of incredible tension, one that could forever define his legacy. Will he emerge as a strong, decisive leader, capable of standing above the chaos and guiding his country through these turbulent times? Or will he falter, overwhelmed by the competing pressures of tradition, public opinion, and political loyalty? The world waits with bated breath, unsure of what King Charles will decide. The monarchy, a centuries-old institution that has weathered countless storms, now faces perhaps its greatest test yet. Will it endure, or will this crisis be the one that brings it to its knees?